The doctor looked at my test results, then looked at my ex-wife, and said 4 words that split my life into before and after. These aren't both yours. I was sitting in a plastic chair in a conference room on the 4th floor of Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, still wearing my work boots with concrete dust on the soles and steel in the toes, because I had driven 40 miles from a bridge construction site in Newark without stopping to change, without stopping to eat, without stopping for anything because my daughter was dying and none of that mattered. My ex-wife was sitting across from me. Jocelyn Egan, 37 years old, pharmaceutical sales representative, the woman who had stood in a courtroom 3 years ago and convinced a judge that I was too dangerous, too unstable, too blue-collar to raise my own children. She had walked out of that courtroom with full custody of our twins, and I had walked out with a supervised visitation schedule that she spent the next 3 years making sure I could never use. And now we were sitting in a hospital together because our daughter Margot had cancer, and the doctor had just told us something that made the air in the room disappear. These aren't both yours. But before I tell you what those words meant, before I tell you what happened in the 60 seconds after Dr. Lena Vasquez said them, I need to tell you about the phone call. Because that's where this story really begins. Not in a hospital, in a truck, on a Tuesday afternoon in October 2024, 40 miles from the children I hadn't been allowed to see in 14 months. I was 60 feet in the air when my phone rang. That's not a metaphor. I'm a structural ironworker. I build the skeletons of buildings and bridges, the steel frames that everything else hangs on. On October 8, 2024, I was walking a beam on a bridge replacement project over the Licking River outside Newark, Ohio, bolting a crossbrace to a vertical column in a wind that was trying very hard to convince me that humans weren't designed to work at this altitude. My phone was in my vest pocket. It had been buzzing all morning, which I ignored because you don't answer phones 60 feet above a river while holding an impact wrench that weighs 11 pounds. At lunch break, I climbed down, sat on a stack of I-beams, and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. 1 voicemail. I pressed play. "Thatcher, it's Jocelyn." I almost dropped the phone. Not because of the height, not because of the wind, because I hadn't heard my ex-wife's voice in 14 months. The last time I heard it was through a lawyer's speakerphone, telling me that my request for a modified visitation had been denied, again, and that any further attempts to contact the children outside the approved schedule would be met with a restraining order. "Thatcher, it's Margot. She's sick. She needs you." A pause. Her voice cracked, which was something I had never heard from Jocelyn Egan. Jocelyn didn't crack. Jocelyn was titanium wrapped in a Nordstrom blazer. "Please call me back, please," I called back. She answered before the first ring finished. "What happened?" "Margot has leukemia, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She was diagnosed in August. We tried chemotherapy. It didn't. She relapsed. The doctors say she needs a bone marrow transplant. I'm coming." "Thatcher, wait. There's a process. They need to test family members for compatibility. Rhett's been tested. I've been tested. Neither of us is a strong enough match. They need to test you." "I'm coming right now." "You don't have to come right. Jocelyn. My daughter has cancer. I am coming right now. Tell me where she is." "Nationwide Children's Hospital, Columbus, 4th floor, oncology wing." I hung up. Walked to my foreman, a man named Stu Gatewood, who had seen me do a lot of things in 12 years of working together but had never seen my face look the way it apparently looked right then. "Stu, I need to leave." "What's wrong?" "My daughter's in the hospital, cancer." He didn't ask another question. Just took the wrench from my hand and said, "Go. We'll cover the shift. Call me when you can." I drove 40 miles to Columbus in 31 minutes. I don't remember most of the drive. I remember the exit signs. I remember the parking garage at the hospital. I remember walking through the lobby in my work boots, concrete dust on my jeans, my hard hat still clipped to my belt because I'd forgotten to take it off, and I remember the nurse at the front desk looking at me like I was either lost or in the wrong building. "I'm here for Margot Egan, oncology, 4th floor." "Are you family?" "I'm her father." The word felt strange in my mouth. Not because it wasn't true, but because I hadn't been allowed to use it in 3 years. "I'm her father." 3 words that used to be the simplest fact of my life and had become the most contested. The elevator opened on the 4th floor. I turned the corner toward the oncology wing, and I saw them. Rhett first. My son, 8 years old, sitting in a chair outside a hospital room, his legs dangling, a book in his lap that he wasn't reading. He was bigger than the last time I'd seen him. His face had changed, the roundness of early childhood replaced by the beginnings of the angular features he was going to have as a man. Features that looked like mine. He saw me. His body stiffened. He didn't run to me, he didn't smile. He sat in that chair with his arms crossed, watching me approach with the cautious assessment of a child who has been taught to be suspicious of the person he used to trust completely. "Hey, buddy." "Hi." Not Dad, not Daddy, just hi. A word with no warmth in it, placed like a boundary marker between us. "Can I go in and see your sister?" "Mom said to wait." "I'm not going to wait, Rhett, but I'll be quick." I pushed open the door. Margot was in the bed. 8 years old. The same age as her brother, born 7 minutes after him on November 3rd, 2015, at Mount Carmel East Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, at 4:47 in the afternoon, weighing 6 pounds 2 ounces, with a cry that sounded like a bird and a grip on my finger that felt like a promise. She didn't look like that anymore. She was thin, pale, the kind of pale that comes from inside, not from lack of sun. Her hair was gone, the dark curls that she'd had since she was a toddler, the ones she used to twist around her finger when she was concentrating, gone. An IV line ran from her arm to a bag of something clear hanging from a metal pole. Her eyes were closed. I stood in the doorway, my work boots on the hospital floor, my hard hat on my belt, concrete dust on my clothes, 60 feet of altitude in my muscles and 40 miles of panic in my blood, and my daughter, my little girl, lying in a bed that was too big for her, in a fight that was too big for anyone. Her eyes opened. She looked at me, and the expression on her face was the thing that broke me. Not grief, not fear, not even pain. Confusion. Like she was trying to place me. Like I was someone she used to know but wasn't sure she remembered correctly. "Daddy?" She said it like a question. Like she was asking permission to call me that. Like 3 years of absence had turned my name in her mouth from a certainty into a maybe. "Yeah, baby girl, it's me. I'm here. Are you staying?" "I'm staying." "Promise?" "I promise." She reached out her hand. I crossed the room and took it. Small, thin, an IV needle taped to the back. I held it the way I hold things that matter, gently but completely, with the understanding that the most important things in the world are also the most fragile. Jocelyn was in the corner. I hadn't noticed her when I walked in. She was sitting in a recliner, a blanket over her lap, her phone in her hand. She looked exhausted in a way that went past sleep into something structural, like the fatigue had gotten into her bones and wasn't coming out. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You shouldn't have had to ask." She looked away. Whatever she heard in those 6 words, it landed somewhere she didn't want me to see. "Let me tell you about the 3 years. Because you need to understand what was taken from me before you can understand what I chose to give. I married Jocelyn Carver in June of 2014. I was 29, she was 27. We'd been together for 2 years, long enough to believe we knew each other, not long enough to actually know each other, which is the fundamental miscalculation that most marriages are built on. I was an iron worker, she was in pharmaceutical sales. On paper, we didn't make sense. I welded steel beams in hard hats and she sold medication in high heels. But in person, for a while, it worked. I liked that she was ambitious. She liked that I was solid. I admired her polish. She admired my physicality. We were each other's opposites, and for a few years, the attraction of opposites held. The twins were born in November 2015. Rhett at 4:40 p.m., Margot 7 minutes later. 2 babies, 2 cribs, 2 sets of midnight feedings, 2 small humans who consumed every atom of energy and attention we had. The marriage that had been surviving on opposites attract chemistry didn't survive the exhaustion of raising twins. The chemistry evaporated. What was left was 2 people who wanted different things from life and didn't know how to say so. Jocelyn wanted upward. Bigger house, better neighborhood, private schools, the trajectory of accumulation that her career was built to support. I wanted steady. The same house, the same job, the same community where the kids could grow up knowing their neighbors' names and walking to school through streets I'd driven 1,000 times. We argued about money, about priorities, about why I wouldn't consider leaving ironwork for something safer, something with an office and a salary that matched hers. "You could manage a construction company," she said once. "You could be the boss instead of the guy on the beam." I don't want to be the boss. I want to be the guy on the beam. Why? Because the guy on the beam is the one who actually builds things. She didn't understand that. She never understood that. And after a while, she stopped trying to understand and started resenting, which is what happens when understanding fails, and the gap between two people fills with something heavier than silence. The divorce was filed in September 2020, finalized March 2021. Jocelyn's attorney, Blair Pennington, was a specialist in what she called asset-optimized custody resolution, which was a fancy way of saying she knew how to take children from fathers who worked with their hands and give them to mothers who worked with their credentials. Blair's argument was straightforward. Jocelyn made $115,000 a year in a stable, predictable career. Thatcher made $78,000 in a dangerous job with irregular hours. Jocelyn worked in an office. Thatcher worked 60 feet in the air in all weather conditions. Jocelyn had never missed a school event. Thatcher had missed several due to job site scheduling. "Your Honor," Blair said, "the respondent's occupation is inherently high risk. Structural ironwork has one of the highest fatality rates of any profession in America. The petitioner is not questioning Mr. Egan's love for his children. She is questioning whether a man who walks steel beams for a living can provide the stable, safe, consistent environment these children need." I wanted to stand up and say that the man who walks steel beams is the one who makes it possible for other people to have buildings to work in and bridges to drive on and hospitals to bring their children to. I wanted to say that stability isn't about what job you do, it's about whether you show up. And I had never missed a single moment that mattered in my children's lives. My attorney, a decent guy from a small firm in Westerville, said some of those things, but decent doesn't beat specialist. And Jocelyn's specialist had spent 20 years perfecting the art of making hardworking fathers look like dangerous risks. The judge awarded Jocelyn full custody. I got supervised visitation every other weekend. Supervised, like I was a threat. Like the man who had changed their diapers at 3 a.m. and taught Rhett to ride a bike and carried Margot on his shoulders at the county fair was someone who needed to be watched. The visitation lasted 8 months before Jocelyn made it impossible. Schedule conflicts, last-minute cancellations, then the move from Westerville to Dublin, adding 30 minutes to every drive. Then the returned birthday presents, my gifts for the twins' 7th birthday, sent back with a note from Jocelyn's attorney stating that unsolicited packages were not consistent with the visitation agreement. By 2023, I hadn't seen my children in 8 months. By October 2024, 14 months. I became a ghost in my own children's lives, haunting the edges, calling numbers that went to voicemail, texting messages that were never answered, existing in the permanent present tense of a father who is always there but never allowed to arrive. I sat in my truck outside their school once, Northridge Elementary in Dublin. I parked across the street and watched the morning drop-off. Saw Jocelyn's SUV pull up. Saw Rhett get out, backpack on, walking with the serious determination of an 8-year-old boy who carries things he doesn't talk about. Saw Margot hop out behind him, her dark curls bouncing, laughing at something, alive with the particular energy of a child who doesn't know yet that the world can take things from her. I watched them walk into the building. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes after they disappeared. Then I drove to work, climbed 60 feet into the air, and built something, because building things is the only way I know how to survive the days when everything I love is on the ground and I can't reach it. That was March 2024, 6 months before the diagnosis, 6 months before the phone call that brought me back. Now I'm going to tell you about the test results. Dr. Lena Vasquez was 44 years old, a pediatric oncologist who had spent her career in a war zone disguised as a children's hospital. She had the calm intensity of a woman who delivers terrible news for a living and has learned that the delivery matters as much as the content. She called me and Jocelyn into her office on October the 15th, 1 week after I arrived at the hospital. The HLA typing results were in. "Mr. Egan, Mrs. Egan, thank you for coming. I have the compatibility results, and I need to discuss them with you." She opened a folder, looked at the data, and her face did something I recognized from watching foremen examine structural reports that show unexpected stress fractures, the subtle tightening around the eyes that says, "This isn't what we expected." Rhett's HLA typing shows him as a partial match for Margot. This is within the expected range for siblings, but not strong enough for an optimal transplant. Mrs. Egan, your typing shows a haploidentical match, which is standard for a biological parent. She paused, looked at me, then at Jocelyn, then at the results. "Mr. Egan, your HLA typing presents an inconsistency." "What kind of inconsistency?" "Your markers are consistent with being Rhett's biological father. The HLA patterns between you and Rhett show the expected parent-child inheritance." She set down the paper. "However, your markers are incompatible with Margot's HLA profile. The genetic data indicates that you and Margot do not share a biological parent-child relationship." The room went still. Not quiet, still. The way a structure goes still in the second before it shifts, when the steel has taken all the weight it can take, and the next fraction of an inch will determine whether it holds or falls. "This isn't possible," she said, looking at Jocelyn. And then the 4 words, "These aren't both yours." I looked at the results. I'm an iron worker, not a geneticist, but I can read a chart. 2 columns, 2 children. 1 matched my genetic markers, 1 didn't. The data was clear, precise, indifferent to the devastation it was causing, the way data always is. I looked at Jocelyn. Her face was white, not pale, white, the color of paper, the color of surrender, the color of a woman who has been carrying a secret for 9 years and has just watched it walk into a room and sit down between her and the man she lied to. "Jocelyn." She didn't speak. "Who?" 1 word, 1 syllable. The smallest question a man can ask that contains the largest betrayal a marriage can hold. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, there were tears, but they weren't the tears of someone who is sad. They were the tears of someone who has been caught, and the relief and the shame are so tangled together that the body doesn't know which one to cry about. "Reed Callister," she whispered. "He was a colleague at the company. It was February 2015. 1 month, Thatcher. 1 month. I ended it before I knew I was pregnant. I swear I didn't know. I assumed they were both yours. I never imagined that twins could have different fathers? It's not possible, is it?" She looked at Dr. Vasquez. "It's rare," Dr. Vasquez said carefully. "It's called heteropaternal superfecundation. It occurs when 2 eggs are released during the same cycle and fertilized by sperm from different men. It happens in approximately 1 in 400 twin pregnancies where the mother has had multiple partners during the fertile window. It's uncommon, but medically documented. 1 in 400. My daughter, the one I had carried on my shoulders and read bedtime stories to and taught to count to 100 and watched take her first steps across the living room floor on a Sunday afternoon in October 2016, while I sat on the carpet with my arms open waiting for her to reach me. My daughter was the 1 in 400. Or rather, she wasn't my daughter. Not biologically. Not in the way that DNA measures these things, with its cold precision and its absolute indifference to love. I sat in that chair for a long time, the concrete dust on my boots, the hard hat on my belt, the test results on the desk between us, Jocelyn crying in the chair across from me, Dr. Vasquez waiting, professional, patient, having delivered a bomb and now waiting to see what shape the crater would take. And here's what I thought about. Not the betrayal, not the affair, not the 9 years of believing something that wasn't true. I thought about Margot. Margot, who was lying in a bed down the hall, 8 years old, with cancer in her blood and no hair on her head, and a question on her lips that she asked me every day since I'd arrived. "Are you staying, Daddy?" And I thought about what I came here to do. I didn't come to Columbus to learn the truth about my daughter's DNA. I came to save her life. And the truth, as devastating as it was, had just given me the information I needed to do exactly that. Dr. Vasquez. "Yes, Mr. Egan?" "If Margot's biological father is this man, Reed Callister, then Reed Callister would be a haploidentical match for the transplant. The same as Jocelyn." "That's correct. Potentially a better match, depending on his specific HLA markers. We need to find him." Dr. Vasquez looked at me with an expression I've seen on the faces of people who have just witnessed something they didn't expect. Not shock. Something closer to respect. "Mr. Egan, I want to make sure I understand. You've just learned that Margot is not your biological daughter, and your first response is to find the man who is her biological father so he can help save her life." "My first response is to save my daughter. That's the only response that matters. Right now, she's my daughter, Dr. Vasquez. She's been my daughter since the day she was born. She was my daughter when I held her at 4:47 p.m. on November 3rd, 2015. She was my daughter when I taught her to tie her shoes. She was my daughter every night I read her Goodnight Moon until she fell asleep. And she's my daughter right now, in that bed, waiting for someone to fix this. Biology didn't make her mine. I did, and I'm not going to let a lab report change that." Jocelyn was sobbing now. Not the controlled, calibrated emotion I had seen from her in courtrooms and conference rooms. Something raw, something fundamental, something that sounded like it was being pulled from a place she had sealed shut 9 years ago. "Thatcher, I'm so sorry. I know you are. And we're going to deal with that, Jocelyn. All of it. Every lie, every year you kept me from these kids, every birthday present you sent back, everything. But not today. Today we find Reed Callister. Today we save Margot. Everything else waits." I turned to Dr. Vasquez. "How fast can we get him tested?" "If we locate him and he agrees, we can have results within 72 hours. "Then let's locate him." Jocelyn gave us what she knew. Reed Callister, 41 years old. Last she knew, he was living in Cincinnati, working for a different pharmaceutical company. They hadn't spoken since 2015. She had his old phone number and his LinkedIn profile. Dr. Vasquez's team contacted Reed through the hospital's social work department. The call, I learned later, went like this. "Mr. Callister, this is Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus. We're calling regarding a medical matter involving a child who may be biologically related to you. We need to discuss HLA compatibility testing for a potential bone marrow transplant." Reed Callister, sitting in his office in Cincinnati, married, 2 kids of his own, 9 years removed from a month-long affair he had probably filed under mistakes. "I'll never repeat," reportedly said. "I'm sorry, what?" He drove to Columbus the next day. I was in the hallway when he arrived. 41 years old, well-dressed, the kind of man who sells pharmaceuticals for a living, and looks exactly like you'd expect someone who sells pharmaceuticals to look. Clean, polished, not threatening. The opposite of a man who walks steel beams 60 feet in the air. He saw me. I saw him. We looked at each other with the particular awareness of 2 men who are connected by a woman's lie and a child's blood. "You're Thatcher," he said. "I am. I didn't know about any of this. I need you to believe that." "I believe you. Are you here to get tested?" "Yes." "Then that's all that matters right now." He went in. They took his blood. 72 hours later, the results came back. Dr. Vasquez called us in, me, Jocelyn, and Reed, 3 adults sitting in a conference room with the weight of a child's life pressing down on the table between them. "Mr. Callister, your HLA typing shows a strong haploidentical match with Margot. You are a viable donor for the bone marrow transplant." Reed closed his eyes, breathed. "When do we do it?" "We can begin the preparation process this week. The actual donation will take place in approximately 2 to 3 weeks. Whatever you need, whatever she needs, I'll be here." I looked at him. This man who had slept with my wife. This man who was Margot's biological father. This man who, until 48 hours ago, had no idea she existed. And I saw something in his face that I recognized because I'd seen it in my own face 1,000 times. The look of a man who has just been handed a responsibility he didn't ask for and is choosing to carry it anyway. He wasn't my enemy. He was the other half of my daughter's DNA. And right now, that made him the most important person in the building. The transplant was performed on November 12, 2024, at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Reed Callister donated bone marrow for a daughter he had known about for 17 days. The procedure took 4 hours. I sat in the waiting room the entire time, Declan Bryce beside me, not talking, just being there, the way ironworkers are, solid, load-bearing, silent when silence is what's needed. After the donation, Reed asked if he could see Margot. Dr. Vasquez arranged it. I stood in the hallway and watched through the glass window as Reed walked into Margot's room. She was sedated, sleeping, the transplant beginning its slow work inside her body. He stood beside her bed for about 5 minutes. He didn't touch her. He just looked at her, at the face he was seeing for the first time, at the child he had helped create without knowing, at the life that his bone marrow was now fighting to save. He walked out, passed me in the hallway, stopped. "She looks like my mother," he said. His voice was rough. "Same nose, same chin. She has your bone marrow now. That's what matters. Thatcher, I want you to know, I'm not going to try to be her father. You're her father. You've been her father her whole life. I'm just the donor. You're more than a donor, Reed. You saved her life. Whatever happens after this, that's something. That's something nobody can take away." He nodded, wiped his eyes, walked away. I watched him go, and I felt something I did not expect to feel toward the man who had slept with my wife 9 years ago. Gratitude. Because without him, without his DNA, without the affair I wish had never happened, Margot wouldn't exist, and without his bone marrow she might not survive. The worst thing that ever happened to my marriage was also the reason my daughter was alive, and I was supposed to hate him for that. But I couldn't. Because hating the man who saved my daughter's life would be like hating the steel that holds up a bridge. You might not like how it got there, but you can't deny that it's the thing keeping everyone from falling. Margot's recovery took weeks. I stayed in Columbus the entire time. Took leave from work. The union covered me. My foreman, Stu, told me not to worry about the job. Declan's wife sent food every 3 days. I slept in the family waiting room on the 4th floor, on a recliner that had been donated by someone who understood that hospitals need places for fathers to sleep when they refuse to leave. Every morning, I walked into Margot's room and said, "Good morning, baby girl." Every morning she said, "Morning, Daddy, you stayed." I stayed. "You promise you'll keep staying?" I promise. A ritual, a liturgy, the call and response of a father and daughter rebuilding something that 3 years of absence and 1 medical revelation had tried to destroy. Rhett thawed slowly, like ice in March, stubborn, resistant, melting from the edges inward. The first week he barely spoke to me. The second week he asked me a question about my work. "Is it scary, being up that high?" "Sometimes. But you learn to trust the structure." "What does that mean?" "It means the beam you're standing on was built to hold you. It was designed by engineers and welded by guys like me and inspected by people whose whole job is making sure it won't fall. So when you're 60 feet up and the wind is blowing, you don't trust your balance. You trust the beam." He thought about that. "What if the beam breaks?" "It doesn't, not if it was built right." "How do you know if it was built right?" "Because I built it." He almost smiled. The first crack in the wall Jocelyn had constructed between us. I saw it, and I didn't push. You don't push cracks in walls. You let them spread on their own, slowly, until the wall comes down by itself. By the 3rd week, he was sitting on my lap in the waiting room, reading a book about space, occasionally asking me questions about Jupiter and not listening to the answers because the answers weren't the point. The proximity was the point. The lap was the point. Being held by his father was the point. The custody modification was filed in January 2025. My attorney, a new one, a woman named Darcy Kellum from a firm in Columbus that specialized in fathers' rights, presented the case. 3 years of denied visitation, returned birthday presents, the move from Westerville to Dublin designed to create distance, the 14 months of complete separation, and the fact that when Margot was diagnosed with cancer, I was the one who showed up, who stayed, who slept in a hospital recliner for 6 weeks, while Jocelyn, for all her polished superiority, needed me there because she couldn't do it alone. Jocelyn didn't fight it. I think the revelation at the hospital had broken something in her that she couldn't reassemble. Not the marriage, which was already broken, but the narrative. The story she had told herself about who I was, and who she was, and why she deserved the children more than I did. That story required me to be the dangerous one, the unstable one, the man whose hands were too rough and whose job was too risky. But my hands were the ones that held Margot's during chemo. My job was the one I left without a second thought when my daughter needed me. And my presence was the one that Margot asked about every morning, not Jocelyn's. The judge awarded joint custody, 50-50. Rhett and Margot would split their time between Columbus and my apartment in Newark, which I was already upgrading to a 2-bedroom so each of them would have their own space. Outside the courthouse, Jocelyn stopped me. "Thatcher." "Yeah." "I should never have taken them from you." "No, you shouldn't have." I told myself I was protecting them. From your job, from the instability, from me. She didn't deny it. I was wrong. Yeah. About a lot of things. About most things. She looked at me. For the first time in years. Without the armor, without the calculation, without the Nordstrom blazer and the pharmaceutical confidence. Just a woman who had made choices she couldn't undo, standing in front of a man she had underestimated for their entire marriage. "You're a good father, Thatcher. You always were." "I know. I should have seen it. You saw what you wanted to see, an iron worker who wasn't going anywhere, a man with concrete dust on his boots who didn't fit the life you imagined. And what do you see?" I looked at her, thought about it, gave her the honest answer. "I see the mother of my children, both of them." She started to cry. I didn't comfort her. Not because I was being cruel, but because comfort between us had to be rebuilt from the ground up, and we weren't there yet. We might never be. But I wasn't going to pretend she was nothing to me because she was the mother of Rhett and, in every way that mattered, the mother of Margot. Biology had complicated that, it hadn't erased it. 4 months have passed since the transplant. It's March the 2025 now. Ohio spring, which means the ground is thawing and the construction season is starting, and I'm back on the beams, 60 feet up, building things. Margot is in remission. The transplant took. Her blood counts are climbing. Her hair is coming back, not the dark curls yet, but a soft fuzz that she rubs with her palm every morning like she's checking to make sure it's real. She's gained 4 pounds. She laughs again. She draws pictures of horses and dogs, and a man standing on top of a bridge which she says is me, even though the proportions suggest I'm roughly 40 feet tall and made of rectangles. She calls me every night before bed. 8:15 p.m. without fail. It started in the hospital and it hasn't stopped. We talk about her day, school, friends, what she ate for lunch, whether dolphins actually sleep, whether pancakes count as a dinner food. The conversations are 5 minutes, sometimes 10, never about anything important and always about everything that matters. Rhett is different now. The wall is down. Not all at once. Walls don't come down all at once, they come down brick by brick, conversation by conversation, lap-sitting by lap-sitting. He started calling me Dad again in February. He did it without announcement, without ceremony, just switched from Thatcher to Dad mid-sentence one afternoon, like he'd decided the old word still fit and he was putting it back on. I haven't told Margot about the biology. She's 8. She doesn't need to know yet. Maybe she'll need to know someday, for medical records, for family history, for the particular kind of truth that every person deserves about where they come from. But not now. Now she needs to recover. Now she needs to be a kid. Now she needs to know that her father is the man who shows up at her hospital bed and stays. Reed Callister checks in every few weeks. A text, usually, short, careful. The texts of a man navigating a situation that has no manual. How's she doing? I send back updates, photos sometimes. He doesn't ask for more. He understands the boundaries without being told, which I respect. His wife knows everything. They're working through it. That's their story, not mine. My mother, Colleen, drove down from Zanesville last weekend with a pot of Irish stew and opinion about everything that had happened, which she delivered in the kitchen while I ate. That woman kept your children from you for 3 years. 3 years, Thatcher. I know, Mom. And she was carrying another man's child the entire marriage and never told you. I know. And you still showed up at that hospital? She's my daughter, Mom. I know she is. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying you showed up because you're your father's son. Your father would have walked through fire for you kids, and you walked through something worse than fire. You walked through the truth. She put her hand on my cheek. I'm proud of you. Your father would be proud of you. I'm on a beam right now, 60 feet up, a new project, a highway overpass on Route 79 outside Newark. The wind is cold but steady, the kind of wind you can lean into. Below me, the world looks organized. Roads and fields and houses laid out in a grid that makes sense from up here even when it doesn't make sense from down there. My phone is in my vest pocket. There's a text from Margot. I'll read it at break. It'll be something about dolphins or pancakes or a drawing of a rectangle man standing on a bridge. Something small and ordinary and more valuable than anything I've ever built with steel. Blood doesn't make a father. I know that now. Blood is biology. Blood is data on a chart, HLA, markers in a column, a lab result that a doctor reads with a furrowed brow. Blood is the reason the doctor said, "These aren't both yours." But showing up is what makes a father. Showing up at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November to hold a baby who just arrived. Showing up at 3 a.m. for midnight feedings. Showing up at school, plays, and soccer, games and hospital beds. Showing up in a pair of work boots with concrete dust on the soles because your daughter has cancer and nothing else matters. Showing up the morning after you learn the truth, and the morning after that, and every morning after that, because a promise is a promise and you told her you would stay. I stayed, I'm staying. 1 foot in front of the other, 60 feet up, the beam holds, it was built right. Now, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you discovered that your child, the child you raised and loved and fought for, wasn't biologically yours? Would you walk away? Would you let the betrayal win? Would you let a lab report redefine what your heart already knows? Or would you show up anyway? Would you find the man whose DNA your daughter carries and ask him to save her life? Would you stand in a hospital hallway and watch him meet the child you raised and feel grateful instead of angry because his existence is the reason your daughter might survive? And here's the hardest question of all. What makes a father? Is it blood? Is it DNA? Is it a chart in a doctor's office? Or is it the man who shows up every day, every night, every moment, and says, "I'm here, I'm staying, you're mine"? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story reached somewhere you don't talk about, hit that like button. Share it with every father you know, especially the ones who show up even when the world tells them they don't have to. Because showing up is everything, and the man who shows up is the real father. Always. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. I'll see you in the next one.